Why don't you run, human? The question that once froze Cade's blood now echoes as Mara confronts Commander Korvax during the facility's chaotic evacuation. With Earth Marines providing cover, Mara makes her pivotal choice, standing against her own commander to protect both their worlds from ecological devastation. In that electric moment, enemies become allies against a greater threat. The perpetual twilight of Arcturus 9 cast a ghostly blue glow across the crystalline tundra. Captain Mara Kale adjusted her thermal combat suit and peered through the scope of her plasma rifle. Her breath, visible even through the mask's filtration system, created tiny ice crystals that clung to her visor. From her vantage point atop a frozen ridge, she observed the Earth Mercenaries' transport ship. Its scorched hull spoke of a hasty atmospheric entry, typical of the desperate outlaws who had taken to infiltrating Calthar border planets since the war. 6 targets confirmed, she whispered into her comm. Bounty hunters, just as command predicted. Rules of engagement? The voice of her second-in-command crackled through her earpiece. Mara's violet eyes narrowed. Commander Korvax's orders stand. No quarter for Earth mercenaries in Calthar space. The Calthar-Earth conflict had officially ended 3 cycles ago. But these border incursions by human mercenaries, allegedly hunting rare biological specimens, threatened the fragile peace. At least, that was what the High Command had told her squadron. I have the pilot in my sights, Mara reported, focusing on a tall figure inspecting the ship's damaged stabilizers. Unlike the others, who wore the mismatched armor typical of bounty hunters, this one moved with military precision. He's separated from the group. I'm moving in. With preternatural grace, afforded by her Calthar physiology, Mara descended the ice cliff, her movements nearly silent. The wind howled around her, masking what little sound she made. Her pale skin, with its subtle violet undertones, blended perfectly with the frozen environment, an evolutionary advantage of her species. The human pilot worked methodically, seemingly oblivious to the danger. Mara activated her superconductor net, its molecular edges humming with energy, designed to incapacitate without killing, at least initially. The High Command wanted information before executions. 10 meters, 5, 3. She launched the net with practiced precision. It unfurled in midair, its advanced technology locking onto the human's heat signature. The pilot spun around at the last possible moment, too late to escape, but with enough time to see his captor. The net enveloped him, sending crackling energy through his body as he collapsed to his knees. Mara emerged from cover, plasma rifle trained on his head. Lieutenant Eli Cade, she stated, reading the insignia on his flight suit. You're in violation of the Arcturus Treaty. Surrender now. What happened next would haunt Mara for days to come. Instead of pleading or struggling against the constricting net, as most captives did, the human looked up at her with calm, almost amused eyes. He smiled. Why don't you run? She asked, genuinely confused by his composure. Why would I? His voice was steady, despite the neural disruptors coursing through his system. I came here to be found. The answer sent a chill through Mara's spine, colder than the howling winds of Arcturus 9. Back at the subterranean Calthar outpost, Mara watched through one-way quantum glass as Lieutenant Cade sat motionless in the interrogation chamber. The temperature had been set uncomfortably low for a human, yet he showed no signs of distress. His wrists were bound by energy cuffs to the metal table, but his posture remained relaxed, almost confident. He hasn't asked for anything, Sergeant Thrain reported. No water, no food, no demands. Just sits there, sometimes smiling to himself. Mara frowned. What about the others? The ones who escaped when we took him? No sign of them. The storm's interfering with our scanners, but they're likely headed for the northern ridge. Patrol squads are en route. She nodded, then entered the chamber. The door sealed behind her with a pneumatic hiss. Cade's eyes tracked her movement, but he remained silent as she took the seat opposite him. "Lieutenant Eli Cade, Earth Force pilot, Delta Squadron," she began, reviewing his credentials from the datapad. "Your file says you were decorated during the Proxima Centauri campaign. You're no bounty hunter. What is an Earth military officer doing on a Calthar border planet?" Cade's lips curved into that unsettling smile again. "I'm here to save lives, Captain. Over 100 of them, actually." "By illegally entering Calthar space?" Mara leaned forward. "With an armed team." "My team is here for protection, not aggression," he replied. "We're scientists and researchers, not mercenaries." Mara laughed coldly. "Scientists don't carry plasma rifles or fly ships with military-grade stealth technology." "They do when they're entering hostile territory with information that could save an entire ecosystem." His eyes locked with hers, challenging. "Have you noticed anything unusual about Arcturus 9 lately, Captain? Changes in the atmospheric composition, strange behavior in the native fauna, accelerated glacial melt in the equatorial regions?" The questions struck Mara like physical blows. These were classified observations, planetary anomalies that had been occurring with increasing frequency over the past cycle. How could he know? "You're trying to distract me," she said, masking her surprise. "It won't work." "I'm trying to help you," Cade replied. "Your commanders know what's happening, but they're concealing the truth. Arcturus 9 is dying, Captain, and we have the data that could reverse the process." Mara stood abruptly. "Enough. You'll be transferred to the main base for formal interrogation once the storm passes." As she turned to leave, Cade's voice stopped her. "Ask Dr. Lucera. She's your chief xenobiologist, isn't she? Ask her about the atmospheric degradation report she submitted 3 months ago, the ones Commander Korvax classified." Mara froze, her hand hovering over the door panel. She didn't turn around, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her reaction. "How do you know that name?" "Because she reached out to us," Cade said softly. "Before her communications were restricted, she managed to send a data packet to Earth Science Division. She's been trying to warn your people, but no one's listening." The door slid open, and Mara stepped through without another word. Outside, she leaned against the corridor wall, mind racing. Dr. Lucera had indeed been reassigned to a restricted laboratory section recently. Her access to communication systems revoked for security concerns. "Sergeant," she called to Thrain, "find Dr. Lucera and bring her to my office. Discreetly." Dr. Lucera entered Mara's office with the nervous energy of someone who hadn't slept in days. Her typically immaculate laboratory uniform was wrinkled, and her silver-violet hair, usually pulled back in a tight knot, hung loose around her shoulders. "Captain Kale," she greeted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is this about the Earth pilot?" Mara gestured for her to sit. "What do you know about him?" Lucera glanced at the door, then back at Mara. "I know that he might be the only hope this planet has." "Explain." The scientist took a deep breath. 6 months ago, I detected unusual patterns in the atmospheric composition of Arcturus 9. The planet's natural regulatory systems are failing, specifically, the microbial colonies in the polar ice that produce our oxygen and maintain the greenhouse balance. "Natural evolution," Mara suggested. "No," Lucera shook her head vehemently. "Deliberate intervention. Someone introduced a synthetic pathogen into the ecosystem, a pathogen designed to target the indigenous microbial life forms that the entire planetary biosphere depends on." Mara leaned back in her chair, processing this information. "Are you suggesting sabotage?" "I'm stating it explicitly," Lucera replied, a new boldness in her voice. "I submitted comprehensive reports to Commander Korvax 3 months ago. He classified everything and restricted my access to the primary research facilities. When I persisted, he threatened to have me reassigned to a mining outpost on Denebula." "So you contacted Earth?" Lucera's eyes widened momentarily before she composed herself. How did you... She stopped, then nodded. Yes, I sent encrypted data to the Earth Science Division. They're the foremost experts on terraforming and planetary restoration. If anyone could develop a countermeasure to the pathogen, it would be them. And you believe Lieutenant Cade is here because of your message? I don't just believe it. I know it. Lysara produced a small data crystal from her pocket. This was hidden in my quarters yesterday. Analysis confirms it came from Lieutenant Cade's ship before you captured him. Mara took the crystal, turning it over in her fingers. What's on it? A comprehensive restoration protocol, Lysara explained, excitement creeping into her voice. Genetic sequences for modified organisms that could neutralize the pathogen and restore the microbial balance. Detailed atmospheric conversion formulas. It's everything we need to save Arcturus 9. Why would Earth help us? Mara asked skeptically. We've been enemies for decades. Because this isn't about politics. Captain, this is about survival. Lysara leaned forward. If Arcturus 9 dies, the ecological collapse will trigger a chain reaction throughout this entire stellar system. Earth colonies on the outer planets would be affected too. A notification pulsed on Mara's command console. Commander Korvax requesting immediate communication. Wait outside, she instructed Lysara. Tell no one about this conversation. Once alone, Mara activated the secure channel. Commander Korvax's holographic image materialized before her. A tall, imposing Calthar, with deep violet skin and eyes like shards of ice. Captain Kale, he began without preamble. I understand you've captured an Earth operative. Yes, Commander. Lieutenant Eli Cade, Earth Force pilot. Execute him immediately. The order, delivered with such casual disregard, stunned Mara. Sir, protocol dictates formal interrogation for military prisoners. He may have valuable intelligence. He is a spy and saboteur, Korvax interrupted. His presence threatens a classified operation of the highest importance. You will eliminate him and any data he carries. Then report his execution as a casualty of attempted escape. Mara kept her expression neutral, despite her growing unease. May I ask the nature of this classified operation, Commander? Korvax's eyes narrowed. You may not. Your duty is to follow orders. Captain, not question them. The execution will be carried out within the hour. Korvax out. The hologram disappeared, leaving Mara alone with the weight of her commander's orders, and the growing suspicion that Lieutenant Cade might be telling the truth. She retrieved the data crystal from her desk and studied it. If Lysara was right, this tiny object contained the salvation of an entire planet. If Korvax was right, it was a weapon of Earth espionage. Dr. Lysara, she called, opening the door. Can you verify the contents of this crystal, quickly and securely? The scientist nodded. I'll need access to the secondary laboratory, and time. You have 30 minutes, Mara decided. I'll escort the prisoner there myself. The secondary laboratory was located in the east wing of the subterranean complex, far from the main command center and, crucially, outside Korvax's direct surveillance network. As Mara led a shackled Cade through the corridors, she maintained a facade of cold professionalism despite the turmoil in her mind. You're taking me to execution? Cade asked calmly. I'm taking you to Dr. Lysara, Mara replied quietly. You have 30 minutes to prove your claims. For the first time since his capture, Cade looked genuinely surprised. You believe me? I believe in verification, she corrected. Commander Korvax has ordered your immediate execution, without interrogation or processing. That violates protocol. It also confirms everything I told you, Cade noted. He's trying to silence me before the truth spreads. They reached the laboratory, where Dr. Lysara was already preparing analysis equipment. The room hummed with energy as holographic displays flickered to life, showing complex molecular structures and atmospheric composition charts. The crystal, Lysara demanded, extending her hand. Mara provided it, then sealed the laboratory door. 29 minutes remaining. Doctor. Lysara worked with feverish intensity, transferring data from the crystal to the secured systems. As information flooded the displays, her expression transformed from concentration to shock, then to a mixture of vindication and horror. "This confirms everything," she whispered. "The pathogen wasn't a natural mutation. It was engineered, specifically designed to target the keystone microorganisms in our biosphere." Cade, still in restraints, nodded grimly. Earth detected similar bioweapons on 3 other border planets, all Calthar territories, all showing early signs of ecological collapse. "Who would do this?" Mara asked. "And why?" "The why is simple," Cade replied. "Control. Whoever destroys a planet's ecosystem controls its future. The populations become dependent on artificial life support, imported food, synthetic atmosphere generators." "And the who?" Mara pressed. Lysara turned from her console, face pale. "According to this data, it originates from a Calthar military research facility. Authorization code commander level or higher." Mara felt the blood drain from her face. "Korvax!" "Not just Korvax," Cade added. "He's part of a faction within your military. Hardliners who never accepted the peace treaty with Earth. They're creating ecological crises to justify remilitarization of the border planets." A security alert blared through the complex, red emergency lights pulsing in the corridor outside. "They know," Mara realized. "Lysara, download everything you can. We need to move." "Where?" Lysara asked, frantically transferring data to portable drives. "The entire base will be locked down." Mara made a decision that would change the course of her life forever. She released Cade's restraints. "Lieutenant, I assume your team has an extraction plan?" Cade rubbed his wrists, studying her with newfound respect. "Northern Ridge. There's a secondary ship hidden in the ice caves, but we'd never make it through the base perimeter with security activated." "We would if someone with command codes escorted you out," Mara countered, drawing her sidearm and checking its charge. "Doctor, are you coming?" Lysara looked from the captain to the Earth pilot, then nodded resolutely. "This data needs to reach the Calthar Science Council. If Korvax succeeds, dozens of border planets could become uninhabitable." The laboratory door slammed open. Commander Korvax stood in the entrance, flanked by 4 elite guards, their weapons aimed at the trio. "Captain Kale," he said, voice dripping with contempt. "I see you've chosen to become a traitor as well as a failure." Mara raised her weapon. "The only traitor here is you, Commander. Weaponizing our own planets against our people, destroying ecosystems for political leverage, you violate everything the Calthar stand for." Korvax laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed in the laboratory. "What we stand for is strength, Captain. Earth grows stronger while we debate ethics and peace. This strategy ensures our dominance." "By making our own planets uninhabitable?" Lysara challenged. "That's not dominance, that's insanity." "It's strategic sacrifice," Korvax replied dismissively. "Now, lower your weapon, Captain. Perhaps I'll be merciful and grant you a quick execution alongside your Earth conspirator." Mara's mind raced, calculating odds and options. 4 guards plus Korvax. No cover near the door. Laboratory equipment between them offering minimal protection. A faint vibration trembled through the floor, almost imperceptible, but growing stronger. Cade felt it too. His posture shifted subtly, weight balanced on the balls of his feet. "Why don't you run, Commander?" Mara asked, stalling. "Take your guards and leave while you still can." Korvax's expression darkened. "Your attempt to—" The explosion rocked the entire East Wing. Alarms shrieked as emergency containment protocols engaged. In the momentary confusion, Cade lunged forward, tackling Mara to the ground as plasma fire scorched the air where she had stood. "Now we run!" he shouted over the chaos. The blast had breached the outer wall of the complex. exposing sections to the brutal Arcturus atmosphere. Emergency barriers struggled to contain the structural damage as Mara, Cade, and Lysera fled through maintenance corridors, avoiding the main routes where Korvax's forces would be concentrated. "Your team?" Mara asked as they paused at a junction, checking for pursuit. "Right on schedule," Cade replied with a grim smile. "That explosion was our extraction signal. They'll meet us at the northern exit point, if we can reach it." "We'll need environmental suits," Lysara warned. The storms intensified. Exposure for more than a few minutes would be fatal, especially for you, Lieutenant. "There's an equipment cache near the vehicle bay," Mara decided. "This way." They navigated the labyrinthine complex, Mara's command codes bypassing security lockdowns. Twice, they narrowly avoided patrols, pressing into recessed doorways as armed guards rushed past. The equipment cache yielded 3 environmental suits, 2 Calthar models for Mara and Lysara, and 1 human-compatible emergency suit for Cade. As they donned the protective gear, Mara's comm unit crackled with Korvax's voice. "Attention all personnel. Captain Mara Kale has aided in the escape of an Earth terrorist. She is to be considered armed and dangerous. Lethal force is authorized. Secure all exit points." Cade fastened his helmet, the seal hissing as it pressurized. "He's cutting off our escape routes." "Not all of them," Mara countered. "There's a maintenance shaft that leads directly to the surface, used for ventilation system repairs. It bypasses the regular security checkpoints. And let me guess," Cade said wryly, "it's on the other side of the base?" "Naturally." They moved through the increasingly chaotic complex. The initial explosion had damaged critical systems, causing secondary failures throughout the base. In some sections, emergency lighting cast everything in crimson shadows. In others, complete darkness reigned. As they approached the central hub, a necessary crossing point to reach the maintenance shaft, Lysara suddenly pulled them into an empty monitoring station. "Wait," she whispered, pointing to the security feed still functioning on the main display. "Look." The screens showed Korvax and a team of technicians in the main control room. They were initiating what appeared to be a base-wide purge protocol. "He's overriding the containment systems," Lysara realized with horror. "He's going to vent the entire complex to the atmosphere." "Killing everyone inside?" Cade asked incredulously. "His own people." "Acceptable losses to eliminate us," Mara said grimly, "and to destroy all evidence of his operation." The decision crystallized in her mind with perfect clarity. "Change of plans. You two continue to the maintenance shaft. I'm going to the control room." "That's suicide," Cade objected. "It's necessary," Mara countered. "I can't let him sacrifice hundreds of innocent personnel just to cover his crimes. Dr. Lysara knows the way to the shaft. The data she carries must reach both our governments." "And what exactly do you plan to do against Korvax and a room full of armed guards?" Cade challenged. Mara checked her weapon and unhooked a pulse grenade from her belt. "Create a very compelling distraction." Before either could protest further, she slipped back into the corridor, moving with the silent efficiency that had made her one of the Calthar's most effective operatives. She didn't look back to see if they followed her instructions. She couldn't afford to hesitate now. The central control room was accessed through a reinforced doorway, designed to withstand direct assault. But Mara had no intention of attacking from the front. Instead, she ascended to the maintenance level above, where environmental control systems interfaced with the main command systems. From her position in the crawlspace, she could see through ventilation grating into the control room below. Korvax stood at the central console, surrounded by technicians working feverishly at their stations. A holographic display showed the purge sequence initializing, 2 minutes until completion. Mara removed the pulse grenade from her belt, calibrating it to emit a focused electromagnetic surge rather than a concussive blast. The modification would fry the control systems without causing structural damage that might accelerate the base's collapse. As she prepared to drop the grenade through the grating, movement at the main entrance caught her attention. 4 Earth soldiers in full combat gear breached the doorway, their weapons firing with precision. Korvax's guards fell before they could mount an effective defense. Mara recognized the tactical formation immediately. Earth Force Marine Extraction Team. Cade's backup had arrived, not at the northern exit point, but directly in the heart of the base. In the chaos below, Korvax grabbed a data core from the central console and fled through a side passage, leaving his technicians to face the Earth Marines. The purge sequence continued its countdown on the main display, 70 seconds remaining. Mara dropped from the crawlspace, landing in the midst of the firefight. The Earth Marines swung their weapons toward her, but held their fire when they recognized her Calthar environmental suit, different from the standard military uniforms of Korvax's forces. "Captain Kale?" one of them called. "Lieutenant Cade sent you?" she confirmed. "Affirmative. Where is he?" "Heading for the extraction point with Dr. Lissara," Mara replied, moving to the central console. "We need to stop this purge sequence, or everyone in this base dies." The Marine signaled to his team to secure the perimeter, while Mara worked at the controls. The system rejected her override attempts, demanding commander-level authorization. "We need Korvax's authentication," she muttered. "Or we need to disable the entire system." "Like this?" The Marine placed a small device on the console. It pulsed once. Then, the screens went dark as the entire command system shut down. Auxiliary power engaged, and the emergency announcements shifted from purge warnings to evacuation orders. "Base-wide systems reset," the Marine explained. "Standard Earth Force countermeasure for hostile takeovers. Buys us 10 minutes before secondary protocols engage." "We need to find Cade and Lissara," Mara urged. "And Korvax. He took a data core that likely contains evidence of his operation." "Team 2 is already moving to the northern exit point," the Marine leader replied. "We'll pursue Korvax. Can you guide us?" Mara nodded, retrieving her unused pulse grenade. "He's heading for the private shuttle bay. It's the only way he could escape without authorization checks. This way." They moved swiftly through the now evacuating base, personnel streaming toward emergency exits, oblivious to the power struggle happening in their midst. The Marine team followed Mara's lead with disciplined precision, moving like shadows through the chaotic environment. The private shuttle bay was reserved for command staff, a small, secure facility with direct access to the surface. As they approached, the sounds of a spacecraft powering up echoed through the corridor. "We're too late," the Marine leader observed. "He's launching." "Not yet. He isn't," Mara countered, accessing a side panel. She entered a security code, overriding the bay door protocols. "Launch sequence requires bay doors to be fully open. I've just reduced their operational speed to minimum." The Marine gave her an appreciative nod. "That buys us 2 minutes. Let's make them count." They breached the shuttle bay to find Korvax's sleek command vessel hovering above the launch pad, its engines humming with barely restrained power. The bay doors above were indeed opening, but at an agonizingly slow pace, allowing the howling winds and swirling snow of Arcturus 9 to begin filtering into the chamber. Korvax himself stood at the vessel's boarding ramp, shouting orders to the pilot inside. When he spotted Mara and the Earth Marines, he drew his sidearm and fired without hesitation. The Marines scattered for cover, returning fire with disciplined bursts. Mara rolled behind a fuel canister, plasma bolts sizzling past her head. "Surrender! Korvax!" she called over the howling wind and weapons fire. "The Earth Alliance already has evidence of your bioweapon program. You can't escape this." "I don't need to escape, Captain," Korvax replied, his voice eerily calm despite the circumstances. "I only need to delay you long enough for my associates to implement the protocol on 7 other planets. This was never about just Arcturus 9. Horror washed over Mara as she comprehended the scale of his plan. Not one planet, but an entire network of border worlds. Millions of lives. "The data core," she shouted to the Marines. "We need to secure it intact." The Marine leader signaled to his team, and they adjusted their weapons to non-lethal settings. The shift in tactics gave Korvax an opening to retreat up the boarding ramp, sealing himself inside the shuttle. The vessel's weapon systems activated, targeting arrays locking onto the exposed positions of Mara and the Marines. "Take cover!" she yelled, diving behind a structural support as the shuttle's cannons unleashed a barrage that tore through the bay's equipment and supply crates. The Marines regrouped, one of them producing a launcher from his pack. "Ship disable authorization requested," he stated into his comm. "Granted," came the immediate reply. "Target is classified hostile." The Marine fired, and a projectile streaked toward the hovering shuttle. It detonated, not with an explosion, but with a pulse of blue energy that enveloped the vessel. The shuttle's systems flickered, then failed, the craft settling heavily back onto the launch pad as its power grid collapsed. "EMP warhead," the Marine explained to Mara. "Disables electronics without structural damage. Your commander isn't going anywhere." As they approached the disabled shuttle, the boarding ramp lowered once more. Korvax emerged, data core in one hand, plasma pistol in the other. "Stand down, Commander," Mara ordered, her own weapon trained on his head. "It's over." "It will never be over," Korvax snarled. "Our species cannot coexist. One must dominate or both will perish. I chose for us to be the survivors." "By destroying our own worlds?" Mara challenged. "That's not survival. That's genocide." "It's evolution." Korvax's finger tightened on the trigger. "Something you've forgotten in your misguided sympathy for humans." The standoff stretched for what seemed like eternity. The howling wind of Arcturus 9 growing stronger as the bay doors continued their slow opening above. "Why don't you run, Commander?" Mara asked quietly. "Like you accused me of doing? Why stand and fight when you know you've lost?" Something flickered in Korvax's eyes. Rage, perhaps, or the first glimmer of doubt. "Because retreat is weakness," he hissed. "Because Calthar do not surrender." "No," came a voice from behind Mara. "They evolve." Lieutenant Cade stepped forward, his environmental suit dusted with ice crystals from the surface. Dr. Lysera stood beside him, clutching a datapad containing the restoration protocols. "Captain," Cade nodded to Mara. "Thought you might need some backup." Korvax's eyes darted between them, calculating his dwindling options. With a snarl of defiance, he raised his weapon. 3 shots rang out simultaneously. Mara's plasma bolt, Cade's projectile, and a blast from the Marine leader's weapon converged on Korvax's position. The commander crumpled to the deck, the data core clattering from his lifeless hand. The silence that followed seemed deafening, despite the continuing howl of the storm above. Cade retrieved the data core, examining it briefly before handing it to Mara. "I believe this belongs to your government." She accepted it with a solemn nod. "As do I, along with an explanation of what almost happened here today. And what still might happen on other worlds if we don't act quickly," Lysara added. "We need to analyze this core immediately. It may contain the deployment schedule for the other bioweapons." The Marine leader consulted his tactical display. "Our extraction vessel is secure at the northern ridge. We can be off-planet in 20 minutes. "No," Mara decided. "We go to the Calthar Central Command, directly, with all evidence intact." Cade raised an eyebrow. "That's a significant risk, Captain, for all of us." "It's the necessary one," she countered. "This isn't about Earth or Calthar anymore. It's about preserving life across this entire sector. Both our governments need to see the evidence simultaneously, without filtration or diplomatic cushioning." A moment of understanding passed between them, human and Calthar, former enemies united by a greater threat. "Together, then," Cade agreed. "Why don't we run human?" she'd asked him during that first encounter. Now she understood his answer. Because sometimes, standing your ground was the only way forward. The journey to Calthar Central Command was tense, but uneventful. The Earth Marine vessel, designed for stealth operations, slipped through the planetary defense grid, using authorization codes Mara provided. When challenged by orbital patrols, she transmitted her captain's credentials along with an emergency override that guaranteed their passage, at least temporarily. Inside the ship's cramped command center, Dr. Lacera worked feverishly with both human and Calthar technology to decrypt the data core they'd recovered from Korvax. "It's worse than we feared," she announced grimly, hours into their journey. The bioweapon program, they called it evolutionary recalibration, targeted 17 border planets, not just the 7 Korvax mentioned. Mara studied the holographic display showing the affected worlds. "These aren't just border planets. Some are joint colonies, established under the peace treaty." "Precisely," Cade noted, pointing to several highlighted systems. "These 3 have predominantly Earth populations, despite being in Calthar space. If their ecosystems collapsed, Earth would blame us," Mara concluded. "And with justification, the treaty would collapse." "And war would resume," Lysara added quietly. "With both sides fighting over increasingly scarce habitable worlds." The Marine leader, who had introduced himself as Captain Reeves, joined their discussion. "How long before these bioweapons reach critical deployment?" Lysara manipulated the display, bringing up a timeline. "According to this data, 3 worlds are already in early stages of ecological decline, including Arcturus 9. 6 more have had initial pathogen introduction but haven't shown symptoms yet. The remaining 8 were scheduled for implementation within the next 60 days. "Can they be neutralized?" Mara asked. "With the protocols we developed, yes," Cade confirmed. "But it requires immediate action and cooperation between our scientific communities." Mara's comm unit signaled an incoming transmission from Calthar Command. She steeled herself before accepting it. The stern visage of Admiral Valen, Supreme Commander of the Calthar Defense Force, materialized before them. His ancient eyes widened momentarily at the sight of humans aboard a Calthar officer's transmission. "Captain Kale," he began, voice like gravel. "Explain yourself. Immediately." "Admiral," Mara saluted crisply. "I am en route to Central Command with critical evidence of treason and biological warfare being conducted by Commander Korvax and his associates against both Calthar and Earth interests." She proceeded to outline the situation concisely, avoiding emotional language while emphasizing the scale of the threat. As she spoke, Lysara transmitted selected data from the core to support her claims. The Admiral's expression remained impassive, but the subtle darkening of his violet skin betrayed his growing concern. "This is a grave accusation, Captain," he said when she finished, "against a decorated commander." "A decorated commander who is now dead, sir," Mara replied evenly. "After attempting to purge an entire outpost of Calthar personnel to cover his actions, Admiral Valen's gaze shifted to the humans present. "And these Earth operatives? You vouch for their involvement?" "Without hesitation, Admiral. Lieutenant Cade and his team risked their lives to bring us the means to save our planets. Dr. Lysara can confirm the scientific validity of their restoration protocols." The Admiral was silent for a long moment, his ancient eyes moving from face to face as he assessed the situation. "You will proceed directly to Landing Bay 7 upon arrival," he finally ordered. "A security detail will escort you to Council chambers. All evidence will be presented to the full Admiralty and Science Council. Do not deviate from this instruction, Captain Kale." "Understood, Admiral." As the transmission ended, Cade turned to Mara. "That went better than expected." "Did it?" she questioned. "Landing Bay 7 is a restricted military facility. The security detail could be there to arrest us as easily as escort us." "Would Admiral Valen be part of Korvax's conspiracy?" Lysara asked. Mara considered this. "Unlikely. The Admiral fought in 3 wars before helping negotiate the peace treaty. He knows the cost of conflict better than most." "Then we proceed as ordered," Cade decided, "with appropriate caution." "And contingencies," added Captain Reeves, patting the weapons secured at his side. Their arrival at Calthar Central Command, a massive orbital installation circling the Calthar homeworld, proceeded exactly as Admiral Valen had described. A security detail met them at Landing Bay 7, their expressions professionally neutral as they escorted the mixed group through the gleaming corridors of the station. Mara noted that while they were clearly under guard, they had not been disarmed or separated. A positive sign, however small. The council chambers were imposing by design. A vast, circular room with tiered seating, rising around a central presentation area. The full Admiralty Board occupied the highest tier, with the Science Council seated below them. Admiral Valen presided from the center position, his weathered face impassive as the unusual delegation entered. "Captain Mara Kale," he announced formally. "You stand before this council with grave accusations against a Calthar commander and evidence of potential crimes against both our peoples. You will present your case." For the next 3 hours, Mara, Cade, and Lysara presented their evidence methodically. The data core's contents were displayed on the chamber's massive holographic system, with Lysara providing scientific context and Cade explaining Earth's discovery of the pattern. Throughout the presentation, the council members remained silent, their expressions giving away nothing. Only when Mara described Korvax's final confrontation and his admission of the broader conspiracy did murmurs ripple through the assembled leaders. "You claim that Commander Korvax acted as part of a faction," Admiral Valen noted when they had finished. "Yet, you have presented no evidence of his collaborators." "The data core contains communication logs, Admiral," Lysara replied, bringing up a new display. These encrypted transmissions were sent to 7 different recipients within the Calthar military structure over the past year. The display showed transmission data with recipient codes, not names, but military designations. A subtle tension filled the chamber as the Admiralty Board members exchanged glances. "These codes could be falsified," suggested one admiral, an older female with battle scars visible on her face. "They could," Mara acknowledged, "but the authentication protocols are genuine. Whoever received these transmissions had command-level access to secured military channels." "Which means the conspiracy reaches into this very room," Cade stated bluntly. The chamber erupted in objections, with several council members rising to their feet in outrage at the human's accusation. Admiral Valen raised a hand, and silence gradually returned. Lieutenant Cade speaks with the directness typical of his species, but his logical conclusion is sound. If these transmissions are genuine, then Korvax had collaborators at the highest levels of our military. He turned to a member of the Science Council. "Chief Analyst Vorn, take this data core to a secure facility. I want those recipient codes decrypted and verified within the hour." The council adjourned temporarily while the analysis was conducted. Mara, Cade, and their companions were escorted to a waiting area, comfortable, but clearly monitored. "What happens if they identify conspirators among the Admiralty?" Cade asked quietly. "Internal security protocols would activate," Mara explained. "The suspected individuals would be isolated and investigated." "And if half the Admiralty is implicated?" Captain Reeves questioned. Mara had no answer for that. An hour stretched into 2, then 3. Finally, they were summoned back to the council chambers. The atmosphere had changed noticeably. Several seats in the Admiralty tier now stood empty, and security personnel were positioned at all exits. Admiral Valen's expression was grim as he called the session to order. "The recipient codes have been verified," he announced. 3 members of the Admiralty Board and 7 senior commanders have been detained pending full investigation. 2 additional suspects attempted to flee the station and have been neutralized. He focused his attention on the Earth contingent. "Lieutenant Cade, in light of these developments, I extend the official gratitude of the Calthar government to you and your team. Your actions have prevented not only ecological disaster, but potentially a renewed war between our peoples." Cade inclined his head respectfully. "The Earth Alliance seeks peaceful coexistence. Admiral, We acted to preserve that possibility. As did Captain Kale, the Admiral acknowledged, though at great personal risk. Mara stood at attention, uncertain of her fate. She had, after all, defied direct orders and collaborated with what had officially been considered enemy forces. Captain Mara Kale. Admiral Valen's voice echoed through the chamber. Your actions were unauthorized, reckless, and in direct violation of command protocols. A pause. They were also necessary, courageous, and ultimately in service to the highest ideals of the Kalthar people. This council recognizes your judgment in this crisis and commends your willingness to place truth above blind obedience. Relief washed through Mara, though she maintained her stoic exterior. What of Arcturus 9? She asked. And the other affected planets? Joint scientific teams are being assembled. One of the Science Council members replied, using the restoration protocols provided by Earth, we believe full ecological recovery is possible for most worlds. Arcturus 9 will be the first test case. I request assignment to the Arcturus recovery mission, Mara stated formally. Admiral Valen nodded. Granted. You will oversee the security aspects of the operation, while Dr. Lysara will lead the scientific team. He turned to Cade. Lieutenant, the Earth Alliance may assign whatever personnel they deem appropriate to this joint mission. We acknowledge that without your intervention, we might never have discovered this threat until it was too late. Cade stepped forward. Captain Reeves and his team will return to Earth with the full report, but I would like to remain with the Arcturus mission, if acceptable. I've become invested in seeing this through. The Admiral's ancient eyes studied the human with newfound respect. So be it. 1 month later, Mara stood on the frozen northern ridge of Arcturus 9, watching as the specialized deployment vessels released the first batch of modified microorganisms into the atmosphere. The tiny biological agents, designed collaboratively by Earth and Kalthar scientists, would neutralize the engineered pathogen and begin restoring the planet's natural regulatory systems. Beside her, Lieutenant Cade monitored readings on a portable scanner, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Despite the extreme conditions, he had adapted well to life on the ice planet, earning the respect of the Kalthar recovery team through his tireless work. Initial dispersion patterns are optimal, he reported. Environmental uptake at 92% efficiency, better than projected. How long until we see measurable results? Mara asked. Dr. Lysara estimates 2 weeks for the first atmospheric indicators, 3 months for visible changes in the glacial microbial colonies. He glanced at her. Patience. Captain. Healing planets takes time. Time we almost didn't have, she observed. In the month since the conspiracy's exposure, 7 additional plotters had been identified throughout the Kalthar military structure. The investigation continued, with both governments sharing intelligence to root out remaining elements of the faction. More importantly, the crisis had created an unprecedented level of cooperation between Earth and Kalthar scientific communities. Teams were now working together on all 17 targeted planets, sharing knowledge that had previously been jealously guarded. Your Dr. Lysara seems pleased with the progress, Cade noted, nodding toward the scientist who was directing the deployment operation with enthusiastic precision. She's in her element, Mara agreed, creating rather than just observing. I think she's forgiven me for doubting her initially. And have you forgiven yourself? Cade asked quietly. The question caught Mara off guard. For what exactly? For almost following orders that would have resulted in planetary extinction. Mara gazed out over the vast crystalline landscape, considering his words. I was raised to believe that duty and obedience were the highest virtues, that questioning orders was a form of betrayal. And now? Now I understand that true loyalty sometimes requires disobedience. She turned to face him fully. You knew that already, didn't you? When I captured you. Cade smiled. That same enigmatic smile from their first encounter. But now she understood its meaning. Why would I run when standing still could change everything. A communication alert interrupted them. Dr. Lissara's excited voice came through their comms. Captain, Lieutenant, we're detecting initial microbial response already. The native species are accepting the modified organisms as symbiotes. That's weeks ahead of schedule, Cade remarked, studying his scanner with renewed interest. How is that possible? It seems the planet wants to live, Lissara replied, her voice thick with emotion. The ecosystem is fighting for survival, integrating our modifications at an accelerated rate. Mara and Cade exchanged a look of cautious hope. We should join the others, Mara suggested. Celebrate this first victory. As they made their way down from the ridge toward the base camp, the perpetual twilight of Arcturus 9 began to shift. The planet's distant sun, normally obscured by thick atmospheric haze, broke through momentarily, casting a purple-tinged light across the ice fields. Is that sunrise? Cade asked, pausing to observe the phenomenon. Close enough, Mara replied. The first light of a new day for Arcturus 9. They stood together, Calthar and Human, former enemies now allies, watching as the purple dawn illuminated the crystalline landscape, transforming the desolate ice planet into something unexpectedly beautiful. In that moment, Mara understood why Cade hadn't run when captured, why he had stood his ground against overwhelming odds. Some things were worth fighting for, even when victory seemed impossible. Some principles transcended species, politics, and personal survival. Why don't you run, Human? She had asked him, her weapon trained on his heart. Now she knew the answer, not just in his words, but in the core of her being. Because sometimes, standing still, standing for what's right, could change everything. The purple light intensified, bathing them in its glow, a promise of renewal, not just for Arcturus 9, but for the future of two civilizations learning, at last, to stand together.